love you, Mom." Those were the last words, the very last breath of a conversation that Godwin Chukwudi Ayogu ever shared with the woman who gave him life. It was February 14th, 2014, Valentine's Day. In the sprawling, chaotic and vibrant heart of Lagos, Nigeria, Mrs. Ayogu smiled into her phone. Her heart was full. She felt that specific soaring pride that only a mother of a high-achieving son can ever truly know. She had no way of knowing, no way of even imagining in her darkest nightmares, that in exactly 4 days, her 19-year-old son would be a cold, unidentified body in a morgue across the international border. His dreams, his laughter, his entire future, silenced forever in a dusty, dark corner of Cape Coast, Ghana. Godwin wasn't just another face in the crowd at the University of Cape Coast. He was a 300-level economics major, a young man carrying the heavy, golden, and sometimes overwhelming hopes of the entire Ayogu family on his young shoulders. Friends in Nigeria and Ghana alike described him as kind to a fault. He was the boy who would give you his last dollar. He was the friend who believed the best in everyone. It was that very kindness, that open-handed, unguarded grace, that would lead him directly into a den of wolves disguised as brothers. By the evening of February 18th, the air in Cape Coast felt unnaturally heavy. The humidity seemed to cling to the skin like a shroud. Godwin was frantic. He was caught in a psychological vice that was tightening with every tick of the clock. He was scheduled to board a flight back to Lagos the very next morning. A flight home to the safety of his family. A flight to a warm meal and a father's hug. But there was a problem. A $5,000 problem. The tuition money. Money that had been painstakingly earned through the sweat and toil of his father, Fred Ayogu, was gone. Godwin hadn't spent it on the typical, fleeting vices of youth. He hadn't gambled it away in a moment of madness. He hadn't been scammed by a faceless stranger on the internet. Instead, he had fallen victim to the most intimate, the most agonizing form of betrayal possible in this life. He had lent it to his brothers, his fellow Nigerians, his inner circle, the people he shared his meals with, the people he shared his secrets with, the people he thought would stand by him in a foreign land. As the clock ticked toward midnight, the weight of his father's expectations became a crushing burden. Godwin realized he could not go home empty-handed. He could not look Fred Ayogu in the eye and explain that he had prioritized his friends' flashy lifestyles over his own education. He walked toward the apartment of Ogunsanyo Abayomi. He wasn't looking for a fight. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for a lifeline. He needed his money. He needed his dignity. He needed his future back. But inside that room, the atmosphere had already turned lethal. To his friends, Godwin was no longer a human being. He was no longer a brother. He was a debt. A debt they had absolutely no intention of paying. He was a living, breathing witness to their greed and their reckless spending. And in the dark, twisted, and desperate logic of a man who has run out of options, it is often easier to eliminate the creditor than it is to find the cash. The morning of February 19th was supposed to be a day of reunion, a day of celebration at the Lagos airport. Instead, at the very first break of dawn, a security guard in the Amamoma area, a quiet, student-heavy suburb just outside the University of Cape Coast campus gates, stumbled upon a nightmare that would never leave him. Godwin's body had been dumped by the roadside, abandoned like common refuse, left in the dirt like he meant nothing to no one. But this wasn't a random act of street violence. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was a message, written in blood and white cloth. His hands and feet were bound tightly, tied with strips of white fabric. A ritualistic, chilling, and deliberate touch. His throat had been slit with a surgical, terrifying precision. The autopsy report, when Eric arrived, would reveal a horror even more profound than the eyes could see. He had been disemboweled. His internal organs were exposed to the cold morning dew. His heart, that kind, trusting heart, had been pierced by multiple stab wounds. Each strike of the blade was a testament to a blinding, concentrated, and personal rage. It was a desire not just to kill him, but to destroy his very essence, to erase him from the world. When the homicide unit of the Ghana police arrived, they found a crime scene that was both gruesome and incredibly revealing. The killers, fueled by a cocktail of adrenaline, fear, or perhaps a false sense of security, had been sloppy. In the soft, fine sand of the Amamoma Road, they had left behind a forensic fingerprint that shouted the truth. Tire grooves, deep, distinct patterns that didn't match the local taxis or the motorcycles that usually traversed those roads. This was the first thread the police began to pull, and it led them straight to a car with Togo registration 5227 AO. The owner? Jimo Oluwatobiloba Timileyin, a 21-year-old student, Godwin's supposed friend. As the investigation deepened, a circle of 5 emerged from the shadows of the UCC campus. These weren't strangers from the street. They were the boys who sat next to Godwin in lecture halls, the boys who laughed with him in the cafeteria. Ogusanyo Abayomi, the primary suspect, the man who owed the money, the man who allegedly used Godwin's tuition to fund a trip to the UK. Timileyin, the owner of the blood car, the man who provided the transport for a corpse. Obi Brendan Ilozumba, a 19-year-old who reportedly held a deep-seated, simmering grudge over a girl, a romantic vendetta layered on top of a financial dispute. Oti Uchechukwu Chijioke and Isaac Ifidon. The behavior of these 5 in the hours and days following the discovery was a siren of guilt. They didn't mourn their fallen friend. They didn't call the Ayogu family to offer their condolences. They vanished. They fled the campus, abandoning their books, abandoning their lives, disappearing into the vastness of West Africa as the police began to close in on their location. The motive was a toxic, volatile cocktail: greed, status, jealousy. In the high-pressure world of international students, money is the ultimate status symbol. Abayomi had been fronting, living a high-flying life, wearing designer clothes, taking international trips. All of it, every bit of it, was funded by the money that Godwin had foolishly, kindly lent him. On that final desperate night, when Godwin finally demanded his money back, the brotherhood evaporated in an instant. Godwin was no longer a friend. He was a liability. He was the only person who could expose the fraud to their parents and to the university authorities. In their cold, calculating eyes, Godwin's 19 years of life were worth exactly $5,000. But as the case moved toward the hallowed halls of justice, it hit a wall that no one expected. There was a silent sixth player in this tragedy: the roommate, Abotsi Enai Gwes, a Ghanaian national. Enai was the one holding the physical cash, the remaining $4,400. His testimony was a labyrinth of contradictions and lies. First, he said the money was gone. Then, he said he had it. Then, he claimed Godwin had simply taken the money back before disappearing into the night. Why wasn't he charged? Why was he allowed to remain a free man while 5 others were hunted down? The Ayogu family began to fear the worst. They sensed a nationalist bias, a desire to protect a local Ghanaian student while the foreign Nigerians were left to rot in a cell, or were eventually allowed to slip away through the cracks of a broken system. The tension between the two West African giants, Nigeria and Ghana, began to boil over. This wasn't just a murder case in a college town anymore. It was an international diplomatic crisis. Nigerian officials pointed to a terrifying and growing pattern of violence. Godwin was the 4th Nigerian student killed in Ghana in that year alone. The Nigerian High Commission in Accra demanded immediate answers. The then governor of Lagos State, Babatunde Fashola, sent formal petitions to the Ghanaian parliament. The Nigerian House of Representatives launched a full-scale probe into the safety of their citizens abroad. But behind the scenes, in the quiet offices of the investigators, the momentum was stalling. The suspects were held for over a year. Their high-priced lawyers argued they were nothing more than scapegoats for a crime the police were too incompetent to solve. And then, the unthinkable, the unforgivable happened. September 29th, 2015. The Accra District Magistrate Court was packed to the rafters. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and the weight of expectation. The forensic evidence was sitting right there on the table. The tire marks were an undeniable perfect match for Timilehin's car. The financial motive was documented in black and white. The flight of the suspects was on the public record. Yet, the Attorney General's Department of Ghana issued a 2-word death blow to the case: insufficient evidence. Because no murder weapon was ever recovered, no knife found in a bush, no blade with a fingerprint, and because there were no eyewitnesses to the actual physical moment the blade met Godwin's skin, the state claimed it simply could not win a conviction. The Circle of Five were discharged. They weren't found innocent. They weren't exonerated. They were just released. They walked out of that courtroom, shielded their faces from the flashing cameras of the press, and they dissolved into the shadows of the world. Some are believed to have fled to Europe to start new lives. Others slipped back into the 200 million people of Nigeria, becoming faces in the crowd once again. They were free. Free to finish their educations, free to get married, free to have children, free to live the very lives that Godwin Ayogu was denied. They were given a second chance at life, a chance bought with the blood of the boy they once called their brother. Today, the silence in the Ayogu family home in Lagos is absolutely deafening. Fred Ayogu sits in his living room, surrounded by the artifacts of a stolen life. Photos of a smiling, vibrant boy who never got to wear his graduation gown. A boy who never got to walk through the front door of his home again. He speaks of the Ghana must go era, the 1983 expulsion of Ghanaians from Nigeria. He wonders, in the quiet, dark moments of the night, if his son's blood was caught in the gears of an old, simmering geopolitical grudge. They didn't want to convict their own, he says, his voice hollow and devoid of hope. And they didn't care enough to protect ours. Godwin Chukwudi Ayogu was a victim of his own heart. He was slaughtered on a lonely dirt road in Amamoma so that 5 men could keep $5,000 and their precious freedom. His story is a warning to every parent, a tragedy for every student, and a permanent, dark question mark on the conscience of a continent's legal system. The case is officially cold. The files are gathering dust in a basement in Accra, but as long as his name is spoken, as long as his story is told, the killers have no true sanctuary. Justice is a slow train. Sometimes it stalls. Sometimes it's derailed. But it never truly stops moving. Before we go, we have to ask you, the jury of the internet, where is the line between a failed investigation and a deliberate, high-level cover-up? Do you believe the Circle of Five were truly innocent victims of circumstance? Or did they simply exploit the cracks in a broken international system? And most importantly, how do we protect our children when they leave the safety of home in search of a better life in a foreign land? If this story touched your heart, if you believe that Godwin's memory deserves to be honored and that the truth should never be buried, then help us keep the light burning on these cold cases. Subscribe to Echoes of the Unsolved 001, and please turn on the notification bell. Your engagement, your likes, your shares, and your thoughtful comments is the only thing that keeps these stories alive in a world that wants to forget. Tell us in the comments below, What is the most chilling detail of this case to you? Is it the cold-blooded betrayal by his friends? Is it the gruesome, ritualistic nature of the crime scene? Or is it that silent, haunting exit from the courtroom where justice went to die? We want to hear your theories. We want to hear your voice. This has been Echoes of the Unsolved 001. Because every victim has a name, every family deserves an answer, and every silence has a story that is waiting to be told. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never, never stop seeking the truth.